Welcome to Why Am I Like This, September 1st, 2023. This container is brought to you by Soul Complex. I know is Red Star Green Cloud. Soul Complex I know is the Heart Chakra of Sekhmet. The space-time fabric of Sirius C. The South Star of Earth, quite soon to be. And I appreciate your patience as I channel my guarantee. My guarantee for this container on behalf of the Soul Complex that I know as Red Star Green Cloud is that no contextual enmeshment will take place in the space-time fabric of this container, which includes the space-time fabrics accessible to the awareness of your space-time fabrics in this container, that some context will be disenmeshed. And I can also guarantee that if you have any issues with the issuance of my guarantee, if you feel I violated the guarantee in any way, I'd love to hear about it. It helps me refine. I'd love to argue about it. If it comes to that. What's up, F-Tech? I guess this is going to be one of those containers of why am I like this, where I don't answer any questions. I don't mean any disrespect to any of the questions which have been offered to why am I like this. But I feel like where we're at in current time would benefit from discussion about safety. I'd love for all of y'all to feel like you can participate in this discussion. I'm talking about like little s safety, big S safety, and hashtag safety. I'm gonna unspotlight myself, so as y'all unmute, hopefully you'll end up on the video. So I guess I'll start a little bit by talking about some of the stuff that's been happening in more public spaces, aka X / aka Twitter, regarding a practitioner who I believe now goes by Dr. Thomas Ager, PhD, AI guru, and a person who is going by the name Ananda, who I knew as Mandy or at Witchels1, if I remember correctly. Fine head of hair there.
Thank you.
What's up, Sarah? It's nice to have you here too. Oh, so yeah, I mean, first I want to like give massive props to Maxim for pulling together a lot of stuff. I also want to respect that there was like a little bit of turbulence in relation to what was shared and like whether like permission had been granted explicitly to share some of this stuff, and perhaps there was some confusion around where permission had been granted to share what by who. And that makes sense because we live in a very fast-paced informational realm. It makes sense to me, at least. I feel like we make mistakes, we own up to them, some of us. Some of us. And then, like, I feel like if the apologies are sincere and there is a change in behavior which is sustained over a long period of time, I'd say that, like, there's, the way that can be spoken is not the eternal way, but I would say that when those conditions are met, there's almost always room to, like, reintegrate, remember disintegrated social bodies, remember disintegrated individual bodies. And I feel like that's happening within the body of what I call, like, the hashtag safety container, which is a container in a Discord server, the most hallowed of places for spiritual practice and refinement. um I feel like there's integration happening in this container too. But yeah, I want to go back to giving a massive props to Lexi for pulling together and, like, having kept receipts on a lot of this stuff. I give props to Maxim for, like, having the get up and go to pull it all together very quickly, responsively. I feel like the timing was very, very cosmic. And I'll turn it over to Maxim and anybody else who wants to unmute and interrupt Maxim. I'd probably take great pleasure from that. But yeah, I'll turn it over to you with a question and just ask, like, as somebody, as far as I can tell, I mean, I'm aware that Hanjo claims that one of the attacks on me was a full earth healing, but I'm gonna say that, like, you didn't necessarily feel like you received that healing. I definitely didn't feel like I received any kind of healing from him personally. But as somebody who wasn't subject to some of things which have been called energetic R word, somebody who I don't feel has necessarily been siphoned by Hanjo or Ananda, somebody who did not get fully earth healed by that attack, what made you feel like you had to participate in this?
I saw Pierrat's original tweet. Like, I had no awareness of any of this. I did one session with Ananda like 2 years ago, and it was nice. We talked about crystals and energy a bit. Quite mundane, but I enjoyed it. I learned about crystals a bit. And yeah, that was like my only. I knew they existed, and then I saw that tweet and Hanjo's interactions with it. And what got me was that he said he was enlightened, that he claimed to be part of this lineage, like, oh, I'm pure Buddha, I have this Dharma, I'm beyond all these things, like I'm one with the cosmic energy and it just flows through me, and therefore there is no me to make mistakes. No, fuck that. I want to end that. That is what I want to shine light on, not in the sense of bad practitioners, but the streams, the dharmas, which I feel, my judgment, are bad, are unhealthy for the intention. Was talking behind, which is why she this defense thing was like, oh, can't remember exactly what she said. Came out in defense and staked her reputation on it. So I felt inclined to put it all together and put it into the public domain. Hey, Nobu. Yeah, what? Yes, Veggie Supreme, of course. All of both. Yeah, sounds good. Jess's tweet, I didn't like that, and obviously because of the whole thing I already said about Hanjo and lineage and claiming to be of Dharma, then I'm just going to close the door.
I lost a little bit of that because my internet connection is in Italy.
And yeah, it's about lineage and integrity in using a lineage and not just using it as an aesthetic and learning like the absolute basic things. Like, oh my god, his misuse of Kali, of that painting of Kali standing on Shiva. He was like, oh, Kali standing on someone, wow, powerful Kali. Kali is being pacified by Shiva's enlightenment. His purity is bringing Kali back to being Parvati, his wife, so that she becomes fully enlightened again, so she remembers who she is, because she's become this rage. It's the opposite of what he thought it was, basically, and then like flipped in another way as well. So all these things which made me upset with Hanjo. Yeah, that's it really. I think saw Jess's tweet, felt it was appropriate to put things out.
Does anybody else have any questions about like this account of I would say like in some ways kind of like the first publishing of the safety container, the hashtag safety container in the Broom? Text, voice, anybody want to unmute it? No, I mean, I feel like must be pretty satisfying. I missed half of that because my internet connection just dropped out. And
Yeah, you did.
I mean,
You mentioned releasing like whether it could or could not go on Twitter. When we talk about, I answered this in the Broom itself in Discord, but when we were talking about the this Google Drive document, I was always under the assumption that that would just be published on Twitter. It would just be in a Google Drive document rather than directly on Twitter. So I saw no difference.
Yeah, I understand that. And I also understand how it could feel different just because like, people don't often click through the documents and all this kind of stuff. But like, to me, like, it's very like relatable, like this misunderstanding on both sides. Appreciate y'all hashing it out, dropping some tea, world history, some pretty basic stuff. So what's coming through for me right now? Yeah, I guess like I want to kind of tell my own side of the story. Again, like I talked a little bit about this in the Why Am I Like This episode on psychic attacks and my gnosis of what they are. I feel like a lot of like where the discourse that at least I've seen on Twitter relates to is, like what is a psychic attack? I think it relates to like me having let Hanjo know that there was a psychic attack going on according to my perspective, and him saying, I asked Ra, like, what does that mean? We can talk about that another time, perhaps. He asked Ra, and he got the sense that the first attack came from him, emanated from him, and it was a full energy healing, actually, full earth healing, actually, not just us. And I feel like a lot of the focus, like, kind of like hinged around that. Yeah, I guess I want to say from my perspective that, like, I feel like the crux of what Jess was saying from my perspective was that, like, Pierre had said that he was gonna like destroy Hanjo, allegedly. I didn't see him say that. I feel like the crux of her defense was basically like, we should be loyal to this person. What he's saying, what he's trying to say when he says he's enlightened isn't what you think it is. You know, he's just one of us, and therefore she doesn't go ahead and say this, and I feel like she says the right words in terms of like make up your own mind, etc. But I feel like what she's saying is like pretty dangerous. I would say that for me, it's a prime example of what some people call social identity theory, or like in-group, out-group behavior, in-group heterogenization, out-group homogenization, in-group favoritism, out-group whatever. I think she really talks about the out-group there. You know, basically like the implication is that he's one of us, therefore we should be showing loyalty. And I feel like what's kind of really interesting for me about that is like what's kind of missing, and what I feel like kind of like gets obscured by the light of her awareness, I'll say, is what about like he's one of us, he should not be doing things that cause people to get to the point that they want to like destroy someone. He's one of us, therefore, like if one of us says, I feel like this happened, you know, I would say like someone who not even enlightened, I would say like reasonably lightened or like unburdened of their own karma might say something like, I'm sorry, I validate your experience, I hear you, I'm gonna look at this. What would you like to see from me in order that you might feel safe as one of us again? If that's her argument, and which I think is like kind of a flimsy argument, because I think the idea that Teapot is one thing with any kind of like unitary value or unifying value system, or as evidence has shown, any form of, I feel like, let's say like community safety protocol is fucking bullshit to me. But if that's her argument, like, why is that not part of the picture? And I feel like this is all to like furnish what I'm going to say about my side of the story, which is that in some ways I feel like the reason I didn't act on this sooner was because, not because I feel like he's one of us in terms of like being like an NEET. I can't remember what that stands for. It's got something to do with being fun employed and training or something like that, I think. Not because he's autistic, because I don't identify with that label, and I feel like that label is like horribly bloated and misapplied. Not because he's under 30, because I'm much older than that. But in the sense that like he's a human, right? He's like a member of like Earth consciousness. He's a member of the cosmos in some capacity. Although I don't necessarily feel that the thought forms he's working with necessarily allow him to often appear or hold himself accountable or even be held accountable as a member of the cosmos or a member of Earth or a member of humanity. I know
I found that anytime he did do something which was harmful, the best example would be his attack on you. He would say, he justify it by saying, oh, but it's actually healing. Like, it's fine. It's I did attack you, but it's not a problem. Like, and then that's fine. Like, people are just like, oh, okay, you know, he caused some harm, but he said he healed him in the end.
Right. Yeah. You know, and like, yeah, you know, I was kind of in this container, as you well know, after being here for a couple of weeks. I tend to be like obnoxiously nonlinear. But what I was trying to get to is like, the reason I didn't go public with this sooner is because I felt like I wanted to keep the body of the cosmos integrated. And that's like a very grandiose claim, but I feel like we could say this anytime we have any kind of rupture with any kind of being in some ways, right? And I felt like there was still space for him to maybe unblock me and listen to me. I'd reached out through a mutual friend who, you know, still has contact with them, and, you know, told him to let Hanjo and Ananda know that I was ready to make peace or talk about making peace, etc. And I heard nothing back. And yeah, I feel like I guess I want to own that, like perhaps if I'd been able to like move on this like sooner, some people ended up feeling like they were harmed by contact with him, and Ananda might have not been harmed. So I just want to own that. And I guess I also want to say, you know, I feel like this is why, you know, the intervention of people like you who aren't necessarily directly affected by these things is super important. I feel like if we're going to talk about one of usness, I feel like this is like a something I would hold up as an example of like one of usness, right? Like I'm not one of us as in we were affected by this, but I feel like I'm one of some kind of body that needs this kind of thing to be communicated, that needs space to be held for accountability, needs space to be held for reintegration, to keep the one of, keep the us that I'm one of as one. I feel like this is very important. Going back to the one of us thing again, I'm just gonna like hold up this straw man and say that, yeah, like when I said that I felt like I'd been attacked and that I had to leave, like not one person in that Discord server reached out to me. I feel like I was talking to Lexi, I was talking to Excel, I was talking to Jack, but I feel like there are many people in that Discord server who saw Hanjo admit to having an attack come through him and was just like, yeah, it's cool. It's like, where's the one of us there, you know? It's like, why is the one of us apply to Hanjo and Ananda? Some might argue that they're two. Some might argue that they're actually one because they're completely bonded in ways that I feel rob each of them in some ways of sovereignty. But why are they like the people who deserve the one of us treatment, whereas like somebody like me who has been working by donation for a lot of the people who are ones of like whatever us there are. I've been doing, I feel like, similar work to the work that we're talking about now that you've been doing, just like holding people accountable. Like why do I not count as like a one of us worth you know, like when Vivid Void made all kinds of implications about me and I asked him like to justify the things he was talking about me, I didn't see anybody show up as one of us to defend one of us against one of us in that occasion either. So yeah, I'm curious, yeah, do you have anything else to say about like Jess's defense of Hanjo and Ananda? I've got plenty, but
then I'll be brief because I don't think I do have much to say. I mean, whatever it is that is causing him to be the way he is causing, like, it's the same thing that Jess has picked up. It's just she's not got all these other layers of like the whole energy worker, like I'm enlightened thing. Like she hasn't got that, but it's the same underlying energy of dismissal and assurance and belief in Hanjo for, you know, I was going to say for whatever reason, but they say it's like, oh, his presence, he's so kind, he just coos at me all day. Like clearly his presence is something, but Jess doesn't have that in the same way, or at least in a very minimal way relative to that. But it's like a for lack of a better word, a culture, or like a stream, or a particular entity there, which attaches itself and like channels through them, and they, due to their beliefs, due to their metaphysics and their devotion to that system, which is flawed, it allows these things to come through them. Because if their system wasn't flawed and they didn't believe in it as an absolute, that would not be happening. They would be resistant to that kind of stuff, discerning, and not, that suggests, I don't know, yeah, not open to like, oh, it's happening, so it's fine. No, what yeah, and it concerns me that it still exists and is like enabled, I guess, because I don't know what conversations are happening behind the scenes with her, but publicly this is what she's saying, and so that has to be what is addressed by me. Because like you were saying, you're one of us. I choose not to be. I choose to be an outside element, to maintain whatever, like for myself, but also for the sake of the process.
But-
So it concerns me that they're basically like protecting her right to believe in Hanjo, because that is the issue in the first place.
Interesting. Thanks for asking, Excel. Please, yeah, come on. Can you unmute? I'm gonna ask you to unmute by pressing the button.
Okay, hey. So, I decided to join the conversation because it just came to my attention. I feel like I haven't had, the energy to really go on about like any of this for a while now. So I just let it run. And I feel like as much as Jack or Lexi or like anyone else who was like a part of the Discord server, I feel like I was also, in YouTube lives. I also used to like follow like a lot of the stuff that Andrew used to say. I did like quite a number of Zoom calls. We used to chat back and forth, and I also like subscribe to the Enlightenment Egregore, and I used to communicate with like all of them. So like I feel like I should have like a lot to say, but like I said, I haven't spoken on it because I haven't had the energy to. But I feel it coming through now, and I also feel like what I would say might have some something to add, because I'm also going to say I'm not let me say happy with the amount of harm that that has vibrated or like emulated out of this, and I'd love for it to stop. So yeah, I posted I think it was a video from Instagram the other day where like he was dancing apparently. And yeah, it's I think from my understanding of like how the programs run, it's kind of like this emulation of some form of joy, calling it joy, that comes through, and it's not based on anything, I would say, that could subjectively be deconstructed, so it feels more like I feel like we've said more like delusion, so more like fantasy. And I've also been in that, coming from like someone, I've been in that headspace, felt all of it. I think in the particular time when I was subscribed to that, like I feel like some of my own actions, you know, might have also indirectly like caused harm to myself, you know, and others too. So like it's like I could see how in the moment I couldn't see like how that, you know, effect like would reverberate, but like afterwards, like I did take a while to, you know, readjust, you know, my programming, and you know that took a while. I didn't understand it yet. I didn't know like exactly what was. I was confused and in the dark for a long time, but it took me a while, and I would also use that to speak to something that I think Noble said in one of the channels. You said it could cause harm, but like not something about harm aversion, or but not like addressing it could cause much more harm. And it's like deconstructing like those, or like dismembering those thought forms at first would or might cause some disintegration, but I feel like with intention it always, you know, comes back to integration, which feels more like natural flow when there's integrity and sovereignty. So I think with this I'm going to probably most likely, very likely write like a Twitter post or something like that. So that's where I'm going to stop now. So yep.
Yeah, thank you so much for speaking. I also really appreciate how you brought it to a level where it's not just about like the people or what happened. I think it's super important to like talk about like what happened. I think it's super important to talk about like who experienced what from whom. I feel like that doesn't happen when people get blocks. I feel like integration doesn't happen when we just like block people because we don't. I understand that we don't always have the capacity to deal with something. I feel like it's of integrity to say, I don't have the capacity to deal with this, so I'm going to block so I can build the capacity to deal with this, so that you could say like the social body can be integrated, the community can be integrated, like humanity can be integrated, the cosmos, whatever. I don't want to get too like fussy about cosmology. But yeah, I feel like getting to the point where it's about like principles, which we might say like not prescribe as being like principles of safety, but like we could say that like our takeaways or my takeaways, which might align with somebody else's takeaways about like what it means to promote safety within a community. I mean, I think one day I'd like to talk more in this type of containment about what it means to promote safety in an individual. I feel like your testimony, if I can say that, in this container definitely elevated it to the point where we're talking about like principles. We're talking about like metaphysics. We're talking about dynamics of, I'll say, like possession. We're talking about the consequences of possession when we talk about harm. And I feel like we're also something I feel like you were gesturing at, which I'll clarify by articulating myself, is that sometimes like, you know, people sometimes say you need to like rip the Band-Aid off and that's going to cause some pain. But I feel like most of us understand that you can't just keep a Band-Aid on forever. It causes a wound to fester, deprives a wound of light, air, some of the nutrients it needs to like fully heal. And I would say that in some cases, I feel like I've been labeled as being unskillful for asking good faith questions with high lexical accuracy and precision for causing people to block me, which is bizarre to me, but I understand that people can see things as unskillful in this context. But yeah, like my understanding is that sometimes a little bit of what feels like rupture needs to occur in order for true integration to arise in the space that's left. And I would say that we can talk about attachment from the perspective of secular psychotherapy, secular psychology. We can talk about attachment from the lens of energy, metaphysics, and enmeshment between contexts of space and time. And I often do in this container. But I feel like often a lot of the things that will cause us pain and make us feel like there has been some sort of rupture, which, shamanic lineages in my experience, and I would say my lineage is referred to as dismemberment, are necessary for allowing true remembering to occur. And I've used that term a lot online. I don't know how many times I've talked about it in Why Am I Like This? But I feel like it's worth saying. I feel like it's worth underlining what you're gesturing at, Excel. I'm glad that you named it. And yeah, I guess I'm curious to hear from like y'all, like the dojo, like if we want to call it that. What are y'all's takeaways regarding to safety? What might be considered like a principle of safety if we align on it? From your perspective, if you want to like chime in text, or if you want to unmute, then please do. But I'd love to hear it. Yeah, and y'all can unmute yourselves. At least Zoom is telling me that.
Could you repeat the question?
Like what's your takeaways about like what this like safety mean in community or for an individual, like having like gone through this entire episode?
For me, I feel like it's a very important, I would say, like, I'm looking for the synonym of like symptom or like okay, I would say like it's a very important like piece of evidence that like we've come so far in building a culture, like that can now host having safety methods, because we recognize that it's not, daisies and sunflowers or whatever out here. And now we can also like give attention to putting in measures where we can, let me say, prevent harm. So that's what it means to me.
What about you, Maxim? I feel like we've talked a little bit about this. I know you're working within a group which is coincidentally perhaps also called Safety. I know that you've been working on like you've been working on this, you've been burning this candle from multiple ends. So I'm curious, like, what have you kind of taken away regarding to safety and promoting safety in community and also for individuals?
I think a lot of it comes from my time when I used to like a lot of political activism and stuff like that with the Labour Party under Corbyn, and I founded like a anarcho-communist little group within the Labour Party meant to represent kind of alternate views, and it lasted like 3 months because there was so much disunity, and there wasn't really people who stood up for like actually getting shit done. And I, at the time, I was kind of I was too wild to actually do that on my own. And the other people who set up with me just dipped immediately. They're like, "Oh, we've got too much uni work, I've got this and that to do." So it's me with like 3,000 people on a mailing list and all this shit and having to organize everything. There's a lot. Point is, I've seen a lot of group dynamics. And also there's a group called Namod. Means we stand in Hebrew. It's like a anti-occupation of British Jews against the occupation. That kind of fell apart because, again, people were just disorganized and not held to standards. Like there were standards set, and then no one actually does anything about it when people are going against that. And so I have placed myself in a particular position where I can interact with everyone, including reaching out to Hanjo and asking him questions before he got really weird. And so, it started with joining the Broom and then kind of being like, all right, here's a thing I can do, expand that. And like, obviously all the conversations with you and the other people in the Broom have been fundamental to that. And then with Vivid Void's kind of initiative for a kind of spiritual accountability thing, I feel like that's the best you can do in this context. And so it's not ideal for me. I mean, I wouldn't be involved in any of this if I didn't feel it was just kind of a karmic something I've got to do. So for me, it's a case of helping them discern and deliberate their intentions, because obviously they all have pure intentions. They all wish goodness. That's why they're doing it. So I just want to be a presence there who, helps them discern themselves and their intentions, and also actually get stuff done. Like does the dirty work or whatever. So my take, the reason I said all that from my perspective is my take on community and safety and all that is that that's what needs to happen. That's what needs to be replicated and held to. And so it's not like, oh, this is me, this is what I'm good at. It's like, this is the thing. I feel like it's not me, it's a thing of its own, a concept. It's safety. It is safety, which we're expanding and projecting. Yeah, we're projecting safety onto people. I hope that's okay.
Dead. Fucking dead. I do want to I think what's interesting to me is there is a thread I put out based on some feedback I'd gotten from, if I can name Jess, who's also a member of the Broom. And, we've been working on some things together for a while, kind of working, I would say, about just extracting some of the general principles. I know we're not necessarily covering them here, and I feel like it would be kind of futile in a way to cover all of them, but perhaps I'll post a link to a thread which I put together just with some takeaways from my perspective on this episode. I definitely want to give some awareness to what you're saying about accountability for getting stuff done. And I don't think that it's necessarily just a word game kind of match with the idea of accountability for experiences of harm, right? I think I want to be very careful. I'm not always the most careful when it comes to articulating things, but I want to be very careful in saying experiences of harm and not necessarily just flat out harm. And I think in some ways they could be seen as completely different things, which are just linked by the word accountability. But I feel like the commonality there is just it relates to meeting expectations and not causing expectations to feel unmet. I'd say that when expectations aren't met and when expectations are sort of disrupted, let's say, there's always potential for rupture there. And I feel that, going back to what I was saying about sort of getting away from the particulars after I feel like we've given them due awareness, but getting away from the particulars and talking more about general principles, I feel like what I want to shine a light on is just that for me, safety is something we don't have to talk about what safety is. I feel like we can, but we don't have to. I'm going to go back to the first line of the first verse of the Tao Te Ching, which says, the way that can be spoken is not the eternal way. So like anything we're going to say about safety is going to be like a misfit for some context. But I feel like from my perspective, I can say that safety is almost always net lower when there is some form of rupture within any individual body, getting the metaphysics here, and also like any social body, any community body, any body of consciousness, like say humanity or Earth, Mother Gaia. Rest in peace, Tiamat. You know, the solar system, like the cosmos. And I would say that in my experience, making sure that like expectations are like set well and that expectations are updated so that we don't end up causing expectations to be disrupted and we don't end up like not meeting expectations is one way which I feel fairly safe to call a method of preventing rupture and therefore preventing net loss of safety. And I'm curious if anybody has anything to say on that. I'm going to scroll through the chat if my computer allows me to do it, see if anybody had anything to say. Definitely got some appreciation for Excel's transparency, some appreciation for the chat and the care and consideration and acknowledgement of the very real, I would say, desire to drop F-bombs and flail about. I'll be lying if I said that it hasn't come up at times. Glad to have you in the room, Maxim. I echo that. And yeah, some burning up of fears about expressing ourselves. I could definitely relate to that. Do you have anything else to say, Maxim? Like on anything I said just then in my wandering discourse?
No, I agree. I feel like a theme was that kind of disunity causes rupture, but also rupture is required for reintegration in a healthy way. And so it's a natural process. And we are acting out a part of that process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a very apt through line to name with your awareness. I'll say I think it's like a law called Goodhart's law, which talks about how like once you identify that something you should measure, then it becomes useless to measure because it speaks to like game theory. And I would say like it speaks to what the Tao Te Ching speaks to when it says the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. And I think it's very true what you said, that like sometimes rupture is necessary so that things can be remembered or truly integrated. I think it's also true to say that like safety can be lost when rupture occurs, even if it's an inauthentic attachment which is being ruptured. But I think it's also, you know, I feel safe owning that like it's a matter of, for me, faith, but I would say also like intuition, or what you might say like clear channeling, or like scrying timelines with accuracy. Or you could just call it discernment, right? Like when does one feel like it's okay to cause a little bit of rupture, which will result in a little bit of safety, such that like, I'm going to say like net safety can increase on the timelines that you feel you are enacting by causing that rupture.
I have a question. What is the difference between what we're doing and I wouldn't say causing rupture, but facilitating it? Although perhaps. Oh yes, please. Yeah, vegetarian. No meat or eggs for me. So what is the difference between what we're doing and causing rupture and allowing reintegration, and what Hanzhou's attack / healing, thank you very much, on you? Because there are differences, of course, but I feel we need to discern them. Yeah, I feel it's quite important.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad you asked that question. I feel like we've been talking in like earth realm ways, and I feel like this container is mostly about like some pretty like wacky. Yes, a pizza was delivered. It was all arranged. It was all arranged. We're sponsored by whatever pizza company that is here at Why Am I Like This in the Broom. Thank you so much. Your pizzas are delicious. Yeah, sure. Um, um, if you'd like to sponsor us, Domino's, and get on Twitter. Yeah, I think it's a great question. Like, what's the difference between like the rupture that we're facilitating and the rupture that might be caused by my experience of the harm that came from the full earth healing or the energetic attack from Hanja? Honestly, I think like to bring it back to earth, I'll say that like the fact that like my phone's still on, like I haven't blocked anybody when it comes, like I haven't blocked the Void, he blocked me. I haven't blocked Hanjo, he blocked me. We're making intimations, like you said yourself, you reached out to Hanjo so you could ask him questions.
He unblocked me again.
Oh, nice. We're making this video, which I feel like opens up channels of communication. You can see like how we are, how we be, what kinds of pizza we like to eat, what we're talking about, deep metaphysics. So I think that makes for an approachability, which goes towards, I feel like what we've all been saying about like holding space for true integration. Whereas, yeah, I think I did leave the server when that happened. I didn't have the capacity, but again, like very few people approached me. I would say that Hanjo definitely didn't approach me. Hanjo definitely didn't take my offering of a suggestion to meditate on his root chakra. I am super grateful for everybody who held me in that time where for 4 or 5 days I was basically yeah, I would say like psychically attacked, experienced like suicidal ideation, experienced a lot of crazy shit. My now wife missed a bunch of flights, and it was very expensive, and some friends put me up. I had, very healing conversations with people like Talamat and Excel and Lexi and Jack, who I still want to hold space for because I want to own that there's been a little bit of a rupture there. But yeah, I feel like that extending of open hands, that like hearing without judgment, I think is like a big difference between what we're doing and what happened in that occasion. Definitely not saying like, oh, like, yes, that attack came from me, but it was a full earth healing. You'll be safe here. Like that to me, that's not hearing. That's not listening. I think like true listening, like I've tweeted before about like how we're gonna do magic, but we're just gonna call it good conversation. I feel like true like spiritual attunement, yes, like there's magical stuff going on. There's disentanglement, disenmeshment of contexts which shouldn't be enmeshed towards one another. There is like exorcism, there's alchemy, there's like stuff happening in the realms of the astral and the etheric and beyond. But I think like at the very least for me, a really based and grounded and like integrated practitioner is able to just like really listen and know when to like tune in and discern and decide that like some rupture is actually necessary, knows how to hold space and facilitate reintegration as well as rupture. And
that really reflects.
Yeah. And like, for me, going back to like the metaphysical side, I would say that like in my experience, the more integrated I am, and that means like clearing blockage in all of my chakras, clearing blockage which comes in through collectively just by like interacting them with the matrix that we all live in, clearing blockage which relates to like distortion between what the experiences of my sky ancestors and my earth ancestors could show me and what I actually receive due to distortion arising from, I'll say, like context enmeshment or karmic accumulation. As I integrate more and more, I'd say my ability to discern what's actually going to happen on each timeline, which I enact based on action, right? Karma, acting. I would say like introducing tension, enacting a bunch of systems which produce hormones, which we relate with emotions and changes in our perception. To me, that's like a pretty good sign of an integrated spiritual practitioner. And yeah, I feel like I'm very grateful for the opportunity to talk about things like at this level, like on earth, things which happened in space-time, things for which there are like textual and material artifacts of. I'm really grateful to be able to like raise it to the level of like principles of safety. Thank you all for joining me in a container which was, I feel like, energetically prepped so that we could raise it up to like principles of social interaction and metaphysics. And I hope y'all enjoyed this container. I hope y'all feel that the guarantee that I put out at the beginning was met, and I look forward to continuing this discussion in all the places. And yeah, I'll share this to the 000 space. I'll probably share it publicly. I might ask for permission, and I'll share the chat as well, and I'll catch up with y'all there. Thank you so much again, Maxim. Thank you so much, XO, for hopping on. Thank you all for hopping on and tuning in and chatting, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace, love, unity, and respect. Peace.